Hi everyone. I did a story on this before, and I guess since I used a video clip, you know the rest. Annie Dookan, former state chemist who mishandled drug evidence, sentenced to 3 to 5 years in prison. Now this is basically from 2013, and I am still working on finding out how many people are getting released. If any are getting released, they're supposed to be releasing thousands of inmates. They're supposed to be able to go back and fight in court to get this thrown out. Annie Dookan, the former state chemist whose mishandling of evidence in drug cases threw the state's criminal justice system into turmoil, pleaded guilty today in Suffolk Superior Court and was sentenced to 3 to 5 years in prison. "You plead guilty here because you are guilty?" Judge Carol S. Ball said as she explained the rights Dookan was giving up because of her guilty plea. "Yes, Your Honor," Dookan said meekly. Dookan's falsification of drug tests in an attempt to look like a highly productive employee prompted the release of hundreds of convicts, raised questions about thousands of cases, and forced the state to spend millions to address the problems. Ball, who found that Dookan had entered her plea freely, willingly, and voluntarily, also sentenced Dookan to 2 years of probation. Dookan, in handcuffs, spoke briefly with her lawyer before she was escorted out of the courtroom. During the hearing, she looked straight at the prosecutor, showing no emotion, as the prosecutor went over the facts of the case and described the impacts of her actions. Prosecutors had requested a 5 to 7 year sentence for Dookan, which I myself think that's still not enough. Her defense attorney had argued for the maximum sentence of 1 year. Sentencing guidelines called for a maximum sentence of 3 years for Dookan, but Ball said in a ruling last month she wanted to impose a tougher sentence given the magnitude of the harm she has done, considerations of general deterrence, and particularly punishment. The judge said in the ruling that the consequence of her behavior, which she ought to have foreseen, had been nothing short of catastrophic. Innocent persons were incarcerated. Guilty persons have been released. To further endanger the public, millions and millions of public dollars are being expended to deal with the chaos Miss Dookan created, and the integrity of the criminal justice system has been shaken to the core. According to the Patrick administration, government agencies dealing with the fallout from the drug scandal have spent $8.5 million this year. The legislature has set aside an additional $8.6 million for Dookan's related expenses. Anthony Vendetti, chief counsel of the state public defender agency, said that the issue of the drug lab scandal is an ongoing concern that cannot be ignored. Sadly, the saga continues for the thousands of individuals who have bore the impact of Dookan's misdeeds and the lab's scandalous management, said Vendetti, who leads the Committee for the Public Counsel Services. He added, "The longer this continues, the more damage is done to our justice system's credibility. The science and evidence relied upon in the criminal cases must be unimpeachable." Vendetti and Martin W. Healy, general counsel for the Massachusetts Bar Association, both said that they were anxious to see what conclusions Inspector General Glenn Kuna, who is conducting a far-reaching investigation into the drug lab, reaches about the integrity of the system. "This is one chapter in a continuing saga," Healy said of Dookan's plea and prison sentence. "The legal community and the general public still have a number of unanswered questions about what's gone on here. How deep was the problem? Is it really just isolated to Dookan, or does it go beyond that?" Dookan pleaded guilty to 27 charges, including tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice. She worked at a now-closed Department of Public Health lab in Jamaica Plain. A scientific determination that a substance seized by police is an illegal drug is the cornerstone of a drug case in court. A defendant cannot be convicted for possession or distribution of, for example, a harmless white powder. State officials have said Dookan's actions may have tainted more than 40,000 cases. According to the state court's officials, 950 people have been given a total of 2,922 special superior court hearings in 8 counties from Worcester East since the fall of 2012, when the scale of the Dookan scandal began to be recognized by prosecutors, defense attorneys, and defendants. Since last year, the State Department of Correction has released more than 300 people convicted in drug cases where Dookan has played a role. That number does not include anyone released by the County House of Correction, the Globe reported last month. Court records show that more than 600 people have had convictions against them erased or temporarily set aside, or have been released on bail pending trial issues because of Dookan's involvement with their cases. The Globe also reported. One defendant who was freed, Donta Hood, of Brockton, is accused of shooting and killing a man in May. Supreme Judicial Court ruling limits charges, jail time, and fallout from state drug lab scandal. There's quite a few articles on this. Just going to briefly go through a couple of them. The state's highest court ruled Monday that people who pleaded guilty in cases where evidence was mishandled by disgraced state chemist Annie Dookan cannot be charged with more serious crimes if given a new trial, and if convicted cannot be given a tougher sentence than originally was imposed. The unanimous ruling by the Supreme Judicial Court was hailed by the defense bar and civil libertarians as a landmark decision that safeguards the rights of citizens prosecuted with tainted evidence. It's an enormous victory. People can get due process without fearing that the challenge is going to land them back in prison, said Matthew R. Siegel, an attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, which sought the ruling. We are definitely in a landmark territory. But a spokesman for the Suffolk District Attorney, Daniel F. Conley, whose office was credited by the SJC for identifying Dookan-related cases, and the court has cleared the way for people who have already admitted they committed a crime to get an undeserved second chance. These convicted defendants now have nothing to lose and everything to gain by withdrawing their evidence-based admissions of guilt. Jake Wark wrote in an email, "What Annie Dookan did was an affront to the criminal justice system, but considering that prosecutors have borne the vast majority of the procedural burden in these cases, seems a lopsided course of action." And it goes on to talk about there's other evidence in the case, scales and packaging, cutting tools, cell phone records, actions, before, during, and after the arrest. Then it talks about she had pled guilty to 27 counts, filing false reports, tampering with evidence, and she's getting 3 to 5 years, and then 2 years probation. That includes mental health counseling if needed. Sure, she deserves that, why not? And she, of course, played a role in more than 40,000 drug tests. They identified 3,100 people whose cases had a potential of somehow intersecting with Dookan and her misdeeds. According to the ACLU and Martin Healy, chief counsel at the Massachusetts Bar Association, no one really knows how many people are linked to Dookan-related evidence, and no one knows with any precision how many people were imprisoned, evicted from public housing, or lost custody of a child because of the wrongful convictions that resulted. See, there's a lot more that goes on with this. It's not just going to prison. We don't quite have a handle on the exact numbers still, years later, Healy said. I'll let you go on to read the rest, but basically this woman cost people time, money, lots of money, mental stress, heartache. The families that were affected by all of this, people being called liars, etc., bad parents. This headline, Annie Dookan pursues renown along a path of lies. Basically, her whole life is pretty much just one big lie. And that's just one of the things that she does. She lied all the way through school, all the way through her whole life. It's a story about her. In the exacting world of chemical analysis, soft-spoken chemist Annie Dookan, or Little Annie, as she was sometimes called, was a dream employee. Consider her performance at the vaccine manufacturer where she worked for nearly 2 years before taking a job at the state drug lab. Most days Dookan arrived at work in the dawn's dim light. Then her boss left in the evening. Her small frame was still hunched over the bench performing tests. She left at overtime hours, routinely got results in a fraction of the time it took others. What's more, she was smart. Dookan said that she was working on a master's degree, and just 1 year later announced that she had completed the work for a doctorate from Harvard University. A banner reading, "Congratulations, Annie," went up on the cabinet. The problem is that not much of what she said was true. Dookan had neither a master's nor a doctorate. how she managed to get results so fast, no one is quite sure. And it goes on to a story about, how she lied basically to get where she was at, and all her schooling stuff was a big lie, and then she even lied about her mother and dad. She said her mom was a doctor, and her father was also a doctor, and they had no record of employing a Sam Day Kahn, because she's from Trinidad. She's not from here. They're not from here. And so her name was Annie Kahn. I was saying she's the only child of Sam Day and Rashid Khan. Annie Sadia Khan was born in San Fernando, Trinidad in 1977. Another part of the story, it talks about how close she was to prosecutors, and she wasn't supposed to be that close to, the state police and all that, and just a little bit too friendly. Papa Christos has denied that the two had an affair, but resigned last fall after the Globe disclosed their friendship. I just look at some of these names. I know I don't mean to be judgmental, but I look at some of the names that were working in the lab with her. And how many people from overseas worked there? Salemi. Yeah, there's quite a few. Nassif. This is at Boston. But actually, this is quite an interesting story.